Welcome back to Telltale Books. I'm going to start yet another series, in case you haven't gotten tired of all the others I'm doing. Another deep dive into a favorite author. This is one that I've really liked his work since I was quite young. Since I first started reading science fiction, I discovered his first story, The World of the Red Sun, which I'm going to talk about here. I've recently reread it because it's his very first story. And the author is Clifford Simak. Simak, by the way, is, or was, he's no longer with us, he was a native of Wisconsin, coming from Millville, I believe, Wisconsin. And World of the Red Sun was his first story, published in December of 1931 in Wonder Stories. Simak, of course, would go on to be one of the top authors of the Golden Age, especially with his City series, a series of short stories and novelettes that were collected together and linked together to make the book called City. He also did win a Hugo Award for his novel Way Station in, I believe, 1963. And he had a long career lasting all the way into the 1980s. But he got started with The World of the Red Sun in 1931. Now, in this story, two men build a time machine and they intend to travel 5,000 years into the future. But something goes wrong and they end up more than 5 million years into the future when the sun has cooled to a giant red star, but not large enough to wipe out the Earth. It's kind of a conventional story, conventional early pulp science fiction, obviously inspired by H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, of, building a time machine and traveling to where the sun is cooling to a red star. In Simak's far future, you have just a fairly conventional dictatorship. And, of course, the 20th century Earth guys, being good old Americans, are going to overthrow this dictator and give everybody freedom. The story is pretty simple. The characters are fairly cardboard. The world doesn't have a lot of world building. And aside from imitating Wells' The Time Machine, there's not any really remarkable ideas here. It's a pretty basic early science fiction pulp story. It's enjoyable if you like the older science fiction, but this isn't a top tale. This is not anything memorable, really. Isaac Asimov put it in Before the Golden Age, which is where I first came across it, and it was my very first Simak story. And when I was 12 years old, I really loved it. But rereading it, it just doesn't hold up very well. So I only recommend it for the purists that really love the early science fiction and really want to deep dive into Clifford Simak. It doesn't really hold anything for anybody else. So, from there, I am going to, that's his first story. I am going to move through chronologically in order of publication everything I can get my hands on. The next one will be a story called Mutiny on Mercury, which was published 4 months later in March of 1932 in Wonder Stories. Not really expecting a lot of this story, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to hold to my promise of being complete. But we'll get into some really, really awesome work by Simak. Was a really good science fiction writer, and we'll get into some really awesome stories from him later on. for now, bear with me as I go through and we can see how he developed. I mean, he was probably, how old was he at this time? He was born in 1904, so he was less than 30 years old. He was a young man. You know, he had a lot of developing to do. And I'm going to take you through that development to where you'll see him eventually write Hugo Award-winning fiction. I hope you'll stay with me for that journey, and like us and subscribe to us. Come on back for more of Clifford Simak and a lot of other authors that I'm deep diving into. So long.